get to the bag, ayy. Got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast, ayy. Ayy, let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, ayy.
This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your lives. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I got a very special guest for you guys here. I'm going to pull him up in a second, but here is your reminder. We drop a weekly newsletter every single Wednesday, all right? I don't auto-sign anybody up for this. If you want to get it, it's all industry specific. We talk rates. We talk about everything freight because that's really all I know at the end of the day. If you want to get on that mailing list, you guys, go to thefreightcoach.com. It will auto prompt you to register for it. I have listened to the audience. I will not auto register you. I will not sell your email address or anything like that. So check that out if you guys want to get it. But with that being said, you guys, I initially connected with him back in 2020, kind of like with almost all of my guests when I started creating content. And that's when I actually started networking and getting to know people in the industry. And he's been on the forefront of the Mexico frontier, in my opinion, from that get-go. And he's one of the OGs out there. So with that being said, I have Mr. Danny Frisco on the show today. Danny, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, Chris, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
No, man, I 100%, dude. Like, I remember you were like one of the first people that I had like kind of like connected with after I had started creating content. Yeah. And then you were in Arizona and we couldn't link up for whatever reason. And then, yeah, man, it's just like time had passed and I'd started, I was like, I've seen you guys posting out there a lot. And I'm like, dude, I got to get Danny on the show. I'm like, and then I looked through my guest list and you'd never been on the show. So I'm like, I definitely got to get him up here. So, dude, what's new, man? What's been going on in your world?
Oh, busy. Still targeting some growth. So we're excited about that. I'm not sure if your audience knows what Rapido does, but I'll kind of throw out a quick 10,000 foot view. So we do nearshore staffing in Mexico. So we have two offices in Mexico, one in Guadalajara and then one in León, Mexico. Probably close to about 700 people at the company total. Oh, wow. And about 650 of those individuals work for our clients. So they're doing, tracking and tracing roles, customer service, sales, back office, kind of running the gamut of entry-level roles at logistics companies. So that's kind of where we specialize in.
So how did you get your start in all of this, Danny? Like what brought you into transportation?
I feel like this story just gets repeated every single time, but I completely fell into it like every single other person in the industry. Yeah. I graduated college with a finance degree and kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. And the job market for finance roles wasn't the greatest. And I had a buddy working at Coyote. They did a lot of good stuff on the recruiting side. So they sent their recruiters to a job fair. I talked to him briefly, but not I wasn't really interested at the time, to be
Yeah.
honest. And then I had a friend who was working there. And then I knew a couple other people who I wasn't super close with, but I knew they got hired. So I was like, screw it, I'll send an application in.
Yeah.
It seems like they're hiring younger grads. Like I had no idea what to expect and went for the interview, dressed in a suit and walked in and everyone's in hats, t-shirts, and jeans. And I was like, God, I feel like a loser. Um, and then, had a good interview. And I think I realized early on, I was like, gosh, 90% of the company are people like me, like younger, fresh graduates, a lot didn't go into supply chain wishing that they were going to get hired by a brokerage.
Yeah.
It's almost in a way like the same people I hung out with in college just kind of migrated to this
Yeah.
company. And, we all kind of shared similar backgrounds in that sense. And yeah, so I took the job and, spent about a decade in the logistics industry after that, bounced around a couple companies, but that really got my start was Coyote Carriers.
Dude, you got to look at it like this, though. You did get into finance because, like, dude, we're just like redneck day traders, man. Like, that's what freight
Yeah.
brokerage is when it boils
Yeah.
down to it. And but dude, I like that story. It is very like, it's definitely not unique. That's kind of how like a lot of people get into it. But like when you brought in and then kind of seeing that, dude, there is a certain personality type. I don't know if it's just like sales or like the industry in general that really kind of make it in it, right? And it is like, I don't know, man. It's like that ex-athlete. And some people want to call it like the frat bro mentality or whatever it is. But dude, I think it's like it's that young and hungry individual across the board. Doesn't matter if you want to come in and be like, it sets you up for an opportunity to really make something of yourself and make really good money early on in your career, right? Like there's no pathway to six figures where you got to work for 5 years before you can even sniff it. Like, dude, in this industry, man, you can come in if you're a hustler, you can start pushing that envelope right away.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember distinctly being at Coyote and at the time, and I'll go back. I think the kind of the type of people you hire today is probably a little different than we saw.
Yeah.
This was 2010, and I think back then it was, at least at Coyote, it was kind of heavy bro sales culture.
Yeah, that's how it was
And
when I got started too.
yeah, and I think that's probably changed a little today,
Yeah.
or a lot, depending on what company you go to. But back then, it was kind of like the wild, wild west, and you came in and you wanted to make money. And I remember distinctly at Coyote, you can search however much money in commission that people made.
Oh, wow.
So there were 100 carrier reps, and you can go in, put their name, and see how much they did for the month. And I remember being in, I got out of training. Training was about a month. We go into Hot Pod for a couple months, which is, like a junior booking rep
Yep.
in a way. And I started searching people because out of curiosity, you're just like, damn, that guy books a lot of freight. Like, wonder how much he's making. And then quickly realize that there's guys and girls that have been here for a year that are making double, triple what I am. And I'm
Yeah.
going, whoa, I didn't know I was at a company like this. And I remember from kind of that moment on, there was a key that turned in me that, like, okay, I need to be way more competitive. I need to be a little more aggressive, work a little harder in my role, because you can make the money, but it's obviously very, very competitive too. Like, no one's going to hand it to you. You got to go out there and make the calls and develop the relationships. But once I saw what was possible, I feel like I ran with the job much more than I would have in a different role that didn't have the ability to make that money.
Yeah, dude, I'll say this, man. It is now, because I got started in the brokerage side of the industry back in 2011. And I think it's way more competitive now from like a sales perspective than like I've ever seen, because like I'm
Yeah.
actively cold calling shippers literally every single day, right? Like I've made 30 before I even started the show today. And it's dude, it's a different beast out there, right? Like
It's hard to stand out.
Yeah, it really is,
Yeah.
because like people get inundated, man. And it's like and I try and talk about this as much as possible on this show is like, when you know your ideal customer, who you want to go after, you need to have like a singular sales focus. And now I know there's a lot of people who want to like argue against that and try and do everything, but I'm just speaking from my experience of somebody who's currently selling and somebody who sold 10, 15 years ago as well.
Mhm.
The singular sales focus now has exponentially paid off from a customer acquisition standpoint than it did back in the day, when you're like, hey, just give us some crumb LTL, whatever it is, and then we'll
Yeah.
work our way up to truckload. Now it's like, man, you got to find a way to stand out. Even the small to mid-size market, where I really like to stand, is like, even them, man. Some of my customers that I've been working with for a couple of years are like, dude, we're getting like 20, 30 calls a day now. And then
Yeah.
just a couple of years ago, we never got any calls. We maybe got one in a week. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like, that's just kind of where we're at with it.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely where we're at. I mean, the market has flipped a little to where shippers aren't as pressured to change providers and vendors at the time right now. Maybe that changes in the next year or couple years, but
Yeah.
the pendulum has swung. So it's definitely harder to stand out. It's harder to differentiate yourself in this market, and I think it'll, you know, we'll see what happens in the future, but I don't think that changes anytime soon or too soon.
No, I don't think it does at all, man. I personally think that the market is not going to do anything different in 2025 than it did in 2024, albeit some, minor changes here and there.
Yeah.
But outside of a black swan event coming in, which I pray to God doesn't happen, I think like we're kind of gonna sit pretty idle here this year. But again, that's not to say that you can't grow, you can't expand, you can't find new business. I mean, we're at we're just changing things up, right? Like we're all about that slow and steady approach. Like we don't have investors, we don't have VCs, breathing down our neck, growth at all costs. Like we know who we are, we know what we're going after, and that's really the path that we're going to stick down here. It might take us a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, man, I want loyalty from my customers. That's like really what I'm going after. I'm not going after
Mhm.
how do I onboard as many customers as possible. I'm really just trying to get in with the people who are doing open deck freight, full truckload, and kind of stay in that lane here.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing that I've seen from not only our clients, but just from the market in general is I think, as the old saying goes, like riches and niches. I think you see a lot of companies just getting much deeper with their shippers and their client base and just focusing on, the flatbed side of things or open deck or LTL or truckload, like whatever it is, but just going super deep into that vertical and almost saying no to things that are outside of your
Yeah.
ICP and that might not fit and you've tried before and it didn't quite work out before. And, I think if you ask brokers a couple years ago, it's just take all revenue, like, and then now they're saying, well, not all revenue is good revenue. Let's
Yeah.
strategically bring on the type of freight that we want, that fits well, that we can service well, that we can make a good margin on. Like you have to make money at the end of the day. It's good to see that change in many ways, I would argue.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man. And I mean, dude, I just look at it like this. I think people overestimate how much or underestimate how much opportunity is out there. Like
Yeah.
I just saw some like the top 10 flatbed trucking companies in North America, for example, right? There's like in the top 10, they control like $8 billion of revenue that comes through. And it's like
Wow.
you're telling me you can't, like, you need to do something else at that point. Like 5%
Yeah.
of that, again, I went to public school, but 5% of that, if you put that away, is about $400 million.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a pretty substantial fucking company at that point,
Yeah.
So
For
it's like
sure.
I just sit there and I feel like people get so caught up with what they don't have that they lose focus about where they should be. And that, that's one thing that I'd like to see. I mean, are you seeing that on your end, man? Like why, I guess, why Mexico? Why did you go that vertical with Rapido as opposed to attacking the global scale where it seems like everybody are kind of like trying to pluck talent across the world? You are seemingly just inside of Mexico. What was that? Was that niche mentality with it?
In a way, so the stars kind of align for us in Mexico. So Roberto, who's my business partner and our COO at the company, he was already living in Mexico. So he actually helped Coyote open their Mexico office in Guadalajara, and then before he left to join with us, helped open their Monterrey,
Okay.
Mexico office. So it gave us, in a way, a trial period through our previous company to take a look at the talent, to assess the talent, and see if we could actually build a business in Mexico. So that was kind of the first part of, if we can pick any country in the world, where do we go? And, we had already played there a little bit. I hadn't gone there before, but again, Roberto was living down there. So it just made things a little easy for us. And then selfishly, on the personal side, my wife is Mexican. Her
Yeah,
family's from Mexico.
let's
Her
go.
grandfather and grandmother still live in Mexico today. And her grandfather owned a business in Mexico for a long time. So for 40, 50 years, he owned a
Yeah,
business. And, luckily for me, I had good connections, and he put me in touch with accountants and lawyers and kind of those types of people early on. So there was a comfortability not only with us understanding the
yeah,
talent there, but like having some connections and knowing the landscape in Mexico, made things a little easier for us. It's the same thing we preach to our clients at the end of the day too. It's like, great talent. You have proximity to the US, so it's a quick, nonstop flight out of most major hubs. And, going to Asia or deep into South America, it just can be a
yeah.
hassle to get to. It can, the time zones are kind of a mess sometimes, and trying to align in that. So, kind of the same things that we pitch our clients on, and the value of Mexico is the same reason we chose it at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I think you guys got ahead of the curve, honestly, Danny, because I truly feel like Mexico is the next frontier for freight. And, depending on how, I know tariffs is like the top thing for everybody out there right now, but depending on how a lot of that falls out, Mexico has already started to see a reindustrialization through
Yeah.
COVID, right? Like when everything shut down, a lot of people looked at Mexico of how do we shift operations down there to build that up. And, there's one thing I've moved my fair share of freight out of Mexico into the States via flatbed. Also, as somebody who is married to somebody who is Mexican and family lives in Mexico, there's not a lot of trust out there unless you can speak the language. All right. And that's just what
Yeah.
I've experienced. So it's like, if you're going to go down there and really try and build up that footprint of operations, and I preach this, a lot too, man, like being bilingual out there, there's that instant connection that you're going to share with somebody, and that trust, because like, dude, if they don't trust you, they're not going to work with you. And like the same goes here in the United States. Trust is a very huge factor. And if people don't do it, but I think you guys got way ahead of the curve on that, because you're starting to see a lot of that footprint build up down there from an industrial standpoint. And, I try and pay as much attention as possible to cross-border freight and everything that's going on. And that is one area that is seemingly increasing year in and year out.
Yeah. Yeah. We think it'll definitely grow, and we're happy to support teams that work in the cross border. But I think you're right, Chris. Like, if you are just a group of gringos in the US, it is hard to penetrate the Mexican market. Now,
Straight
if
up.
you go into that same conversation and you say, hey, we have a Mexico office in Guadalajara, we've got boots on the ground, like, this is what we do. That goes a long way, especially for clients within Mexico.
Yeah, and it is, dude. It's just like the business customs as well, right? Because the way that we operate here in the United States is not acceptable in other countries out there.
Yeah.
It's at least, again, I'm not speaking for anybody other than my own personal experience. It's not as in your face down there as it is up here, right? Where it's like, hey, boom, 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 boom. There is a definite pace in other countries that are done, and there's business, international customs and stuff like that people take very seriously. And I think like if there's one thing I've noticed about people who are American is when you travel abroad is you think it's just that way everywhere, and it's not, man. Dude,
Yeah.
you need to get
There's
out
a
and
level of ignorance that we
oh,
have.
a massive level of ignorance, Danny.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, so how are you guys working with people like from a talent perspective? Like do you guys have the systems in place now, or is it, where, hey man, I'm looking for sales ops, anything like that, and then you guys just kind of run with it? What does that experience look like if I was coming to you?
Yeah, so clients kind of use us in different ways depending on what their need is,
Mhm.
right? So if they're just shipping domestically and want to cut costs in a way and get access to Mexican talent, that's where we can come in and help staff those employees for them, help train them up, help manage them so they're productive and hitting their KPIs. I think staying on the Mexico cross-border theme a little more, some clients use us just primarily to open an office in Mexico.
Yeah.
So, if you think about starting a business in Mexico, and I'm sure this has crossed their minds before, but it's a lot harder than I think most people would realize.
Yeah.
And I tell this story a lot. When I started Rapido, US, I went online, I got my LLC, got my tax ID number a day later or something like that. And then I was a business owner in the US. Like I could hire people, I can do what you needed to do to run a business. In Mexico, that same process took us about 3 or 4 months.
Mhm.
So there's getting lawyers involved, there's getting kind of how you set up the board structure. You have to work with accountants and like state and local government, and everything's done very manual. So it's just a process, and managing that as a logistics company can be very, very challenging when you've never had that experience before. When you are just trying to open an office to penetrate a market, 9 times out of 10, it's probably easier to do it through a company like ours. And we can have you up and running and hiring people within about 3 to 4 weeks versus what you would have to do on your own. And anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and then hire their own HR people, hire their own talent team, kind of expand like you would in a real office that you own. And I think it just makes it for cleaner and easier and more efficient to do something like that through us than doing it on your own, depending on how big your appetite is, right?
Yeah.
So there's obviously the billion-dollar brokerages out there that it might make a little bit more sense for them to go and do it on their own. But I would argue if you're about 500 and below, you should probably work with a partner if you're trying to open up international offices.
Yeah. I think like that, knowing that as you're going into it and looking into expansion, right? And then paying attention to the next, 5, probably even decade, of 5 to 10 years inside of transportation on where things are going to trend out there, and having that international footprint. I feel like at some point you need that, right? Like you need, whether it's in Canada or down in Mexico. And it's like, why wouldn't you research that and then, try and find somebody who has those established relationships that are out there? Because, like the reality is, and you could probably relate to this a little bit, Danny, when you're building up a business, it doesn't just happen, in great due time. You have all this time to process and plan.
Yeah.
Shit's pretty instantaneous, right? And
Yeah.
and I look at it as a saying that I hear often is time kills all deals. And if you're not willing to go out there and start doing that and start researching that and getting that going, I mean, you got to start thinking ahead, right? I feel like a lot of people are so reactionary in their approach to business and stuff like that. But it's like, if you have customers that you're onboarding right now that have opportunities down in Mexico, you should start having that conversation right now about putting people down there and having them down there, because again, it's a different ball game. And if that is truly the next frontier, which I think it is, right? Like I truly feel
Mhm.
like there is going to be a massive influx in manufacturing in Mexico over the next decade is, dude, I feel like this is like a no-brainer for individuals to go out there and talk to somebody like you to really get a lay of the land, at least to get that ball rolling, because it's only a matter of time before somebody calls your number and says, hey man, we have all this opportunity out of Mexico. What can you do for us?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just the learning experience of how things work differently in Mexico, I think is pretty key. One
Mhm.
thing that we always say to people too is, make sure that you have the subject matter expert on staff,
Yeah.
right? Like you need someone who's done it before, that shipped these loads before, that understand what can happen at the border and with the customs agents and so forth. And then you can slowly, our recommendation is have that person in the US and slowly build a team around them in Mexico. So you get the expert, but you also get the support team behind the scenes that can help take care of any of that freight that comes over.
Are you seeing more people from a customer sales standpoint looking to staff that way, or are they starting with operations? What does that look like?
Usually operations, kind of back office type roles. We do have some sales reps at the company that work on behalf of our clients. Um, as you probably know with Mexico, it on the sales side, it is slower, especially in freight. There's more of the building rapport, getting to know you stage. Even like the, hey, let's meet in person. We're not going to do business with anyone that we don't actually meet in person. So I think that's important as well when companies start to think about how to structure those sales reps. And that would be important in my mind if you're looking to expand into Mexico. Like start to understand, hey, you will probably need to get in front of these individuals. You'll probably have to do a little more, travel and entertainment that you might do with onshore domestic freight. More often than not, you're not going to call a shipper and they're just going to say like, oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
random person who called me and like I'm going to send you my freight, right? It's a little more personal in Mexico.
Yeah, dude, we even noticed that, like, we had a customer here in the United States that we were ordering product from Mexico, and they wouldn't even do it unless we flew down there.
Yeah.
Like, we had to
Yeah.
fly down there and meet them in person just to be able to purchase said product so
Yeah.
dude, it's a whole different ball game down there, and, that, like, there is the customs are significantly different in other parts of there, and as we are more and more of I mean, we've always been a global industry, but I feel like domestic US truckload is expanding at a rapid pace. And you need to really stay ahead of the curve on this. And having those established businesses that are down there, because again, like I just look at it as somebody who's trying to build and working to build and scale their company. Opportunities are not as plentiful as some people like to post on the internet, you guys. It is very
Yeah.
challenging to build a
Yeah.
business. It takes a lot of work and effort to get up to that point. And a lot of us, as you are building and scaling your business, revenue is at a shortage, right? And then that opportunity is going to inevitably come your way. And are you prepared to execute upon that? Because it's like
Yeah.
these sales cycles now, Danny, when I'm seeing, I mean, dude, a lot of them are minimum of 12 months for a lot of them,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
but that's just the way that the market's performing. I mean, I've heard as
Yeah.
long as
That's the
3
reality of it.
3-year sales cycles that are going on right now. So it's like, are you committed to it? And then in the event that first opportunity pops up, what if it is, hey man, we have this shipment stuck down in Mexico. What can you do for us? That might be your only opportunity in that moment.
Yeah,
It
for
sounds
sure.
far fetched, but again, coming from somebody who actually brokers freight still, it's not as far fetched as you think in today's environment. But
Yeah.
Danny, I
Completely
appreciate
agree.
it, man.
Yeah.
It flew by, dude. We try and keep
I
these
know that
shows
was
to 30
quick.
minutes because it's like it's in and out, and I got to get back to cold calling, and everybody else got to get
Yeah.
back to moving some freight here. But dude, how does anybody reach out to you guys to find out more about what you got going on down at Rapido?
Yeah, so our website, if you want to check it out, is gorapido.com, and then can email me directly. My email is dfrisco@gorapido.com. Be happy
Perfect.
to help. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Danny, thank you so much for joining me. If you guys can't find Danny or Rapido out there, hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in direct contact with them. But that's going to be it for today, you guys. We got guests coming on tomorrow and Friday as well. And we pretty much got guests going on all the time now, you guys. But as always,
Awesome.
if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show. If you're feeling really ambitious after this one, which you should be, rank the show on iTunes and Spotify, because that's how we really get out there, guys, is if you saw value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.